ultimately we talk about how do we define palliative care. It is a response to suffering, period, full stop. So there's one patient encounter that I'll never forget. It was a patient from the south side of Belize City, so a poorer part of the city. He had a really terrible head and neck cancer. There was no more cancer-directed therapies that could be offered. And she had been visiting him in his home for the past number of months, and she took me with her. And we had to walk through sort of like a swamp, and there were planks to get over the swamp to get to this house that had sort of a partial roof. And he was all the way back in the corner. The wound had started to be getting infected. And so there was a smell in the house. And so a lot of the family didn't want to be near him. And Dr. Thompson just walked in, sat right next to him. She's about 5'0", but one of the fiercest women that I've ever met. And she just sits down, plops right next to him and looks at him and starts talking to him about his day and how he's feeling in this matter-of-fact, calm way that immediately his inherent dignity just became illuminated because of her commitment to him.
I'm a bit of a history geek, and I believe it was Arnold Toynbee, Toynbee. Our listeners could check me on this. And so he had done research on every civilization in the history of mankind. And he said this was the number one indicator on whether that civilization continues or not. So think of the profoundness of what I'm about ready to say. You know, that number one indicator is what that society did for those that could not do for themselves, especially the old and infirm.
I truly believe palliative care, especially global collaborative networks of connecting across borders and across cultures to learn from each other of how compassion plays out and how care plays out, I think is one of the seeds that we can work towards to be a more peaceable society and better understand each other and go back to caring for each other instead of fighting and arguing with each other. And so we can say 80% of patients have access to palliative care, but what do we mean by that? Does that mean, and so one example that I'll just briefly give you. So in Colombia, I had an experience of a family member. So my wife is from Colombia. And so it was an uncle that had a serious cancer, was nearing the end of his life. And we went to one of the hospitals in Bogota, and he needed palliative care. And I was a palliative care fellow at the time. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, palliative care is going to come. And they came and they saw him for about 6 minutes and they asked him about his pain and they gave him the opioid prescription and they said, okay, good luck. When I first started in this work, I think I really strived to think things like power dynamics and money and race to try to be blind about them and just, we're just here and we're trying to work together. And I think an essential lesson that I've learned from my colleagues is that power is only invisible to those that already have it.